At the simplest level, cancer or cancer cells are cells that have lost the ability to follow the normal control that the body exerts on all cells. In our body, we have billions and billions of cells, and they have different functions. It's a very complicated process under incredibly phenomenal control. And if something goes wrong and that control is lost, then particular cells escape the normal control mechanisms, and they continue.
It's my skin condition. It's called vitiligo. And vitiligo is basically my immune system feels that my melanin, which is what makes color in your skin, thinks my melanin is a disease, something similar to, the common cold. So it fights it off. And that, makes my skin turn white.
Here in the United States, it is inflammation of the stomach lining or gastric mucosa that helps defend the stomach walls from the acid that is necessary for digestion of food. Causes. There are many causes that are involved in the development of gastritis. The stomach produces acid that is necessary for digestion of food. This acid would destroy the lining of the stomach. But the stomach lining is protected by a natural mucus barrier. This natural barrier can become damaged by many factors, which lead to gas.
Really good news. Rubella, also known as German measles, is an infection that spread the same way as other viruses, through particles in the air. The symptoms are generally pretty mild, things like a rash, a runny nose, or a headache. Often people don't even know they have it. But if pregnant women get it, especially in the first few months of their pregnancy, that can cause big problems. Their babies are really likely to be born with something called congenital rubella syndrome, which can make them deaf, blind, or give them serious lifelong illness.
Malaria is an infection that can be caused by a few different types of Plasmodium species, which are single-celled parasites that get spread around by mosquitoes. Once the Plasmodium gets into the bloodstream, it starts to infect and destroy mainly liver cells and red blood cells, which causes a variety of symptoms and sometimes even death.
Acne is a skin disease consisting of blemishes that can occur on your face, neck, chest, shoulders, and back. Acne is very common during the teen years, but it can affect you during adulthood as well. To keep your hair and skin well lubricated, your body depends on sebaceous glands, which sit just under your skin. These glands secrete an oily
Its official name is Hansen's disease, after the scientists who discovered its causative agent, Mycobacterium leprae. This bacteria spreads mostly through direct contact with saliva or mucus, but also through certain animals, such as armadillos, which have an ideal body temperature to keep the bacteria alive. So, contrary to widespread belief, leprosy is not actually very infectious. And those who are unlucky enough to contract the disease often go years before seeking treatment, as the bacteria reproduces very slowly, and symptoms can take anywhere from 5 to 20 years to develop. That means you
Parkinson's disease, which is sometimes called Parkinson disease, Parkinson's, or just PD, is a movement disorder where the dopamine-producing neurons in the substantia nigra of the brain undergo degeneration. Parkinson's is one of the most common neurological disorders. It's a progressive, adult-onset disease, and it gets more common with age, affecting about 1% of people over 60. Most of the time, there's no known cause, but in a few cases, there might be a genetic cause, like mutations in the PINK1, Parkin, or alpha-synuclein genes. And in rare cases, Parkinsonian symptoms might be caused by MPTP, a toxic impurity that can be found in the recreational drug MPPP, or desmethylprotein. which is a synthetic.
You hear the word tumor, you probably think not good, and they can be pretty scary. In their mildest form, tumors are just a lump of cells hanging out in your body. At their worst, those cells are dividing and spreading like wildfire. They're cancerous. But there's one kind of tumor that's basically straight out of a horror movie. If you peek inside a teratoma, you might find hair, teeth, eyes, or even brain cells. As strange as those tumors are, the jumbles of body parts aren't actually turning into people, but they have
often just called bulimia, is a disorder that's characterized by rapid, out-of-control binge eating past the point of fullness or comfort, followed by purging either by self-induced vomiting, done manually or sometimes with ipecac syrup, by taking laxatives, or by using diuretics. To fit the diagnosis, these cycles of binging and purging must repeat consistently at least once a week for a period of 3 months, but can happen as often as multiple times per day.
These structures are called cilia, and they actually move the mucus out of the lung. Yeah, mucus, yuck. But mucus is actually very important. Mucus traps particulates, viruses, potential allergens, and these little cilia move and clear the mucus out.
At Harvard University. Before they went through the social stress test, they were taught to rethink their stress response as helpful. That pounding heart is preparing you for action. If you're breathing faster, it's no problem. It's getting more oxygen to your brain. And participants who learned to view the stress response as helpful for their performance, well, they were less stressed out, less anxious, more confident. But the most fascinating finding to me was how their physical stress response changed. Now, in a typical stress response, your heart rate goes up and your blood vessels constrict like this. And this is one of the reasons that chronic stress is sometimes associated with cardiovascular disease. It's not really healthy to be in this state all the time. But in the study, when participants viewed their stress response as helpful, their blood vessels stayed relaxed like this. Their heart was still pounding, but this is a much healthier cardiovascular profile. It actually looks a lot like what happens in moments of joy. And
an electrical wave then moves rapidly towards the brain. At some point, each neuron reaches its limit, and the signal must be transferred to the next set of neurons. Here, calcium channels open and secondarily cause the release of chemicals called neurotransmitters into the synapses, where receptors on the adjacent neurons must detect the neurotransmitters and regenerate the electrical signal. It is during this complex process that mistakes can be made. Think of a genetic defect as a mixed-up message about how the cell is to
Opposite case. Flour would not be considered by many to be a hazardous substance. However, if a baker were to be exposed over a period of time to airborne flour, he or she could develop dermatitis, conjunctivitis, rhinitis, and even asthma. So even something that is considered a low hazard can present substantial risk, and vice versa.
Bones contain cells called osteoclasts that break down bone tissue. Other cells, called osteoblasts, make new bone tissue using minerals such as calcium and phosphate from the blood. Hormones such as estrogen, growth hormone, and testosterone help keep the number and activity of osteoblasts higher than osteoclasts so that more bone is made than removed.